John Reed, John ERP, SAP Mobility Blowout. What's up? John Appleby makes his triumphant return with his bluefin compadre Oliver Rogers. What's up, guys?
We're good. How you doing, John?
Doing well, man. Overcoming technical difficulties, and we're ready to rock. And then we have John Moy staying up late for us in Australia, man. What's up?
Oh, it's all good. There's plenty of stuff going on. There's plenty of mobility news to keep up with.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk SAP Mobility. I want to get into developer engagement, and I want to start off with a look from the field, what you guys are actually seeing on projects and what you're working on and stuff like that. So we might tiptoe into pricing some as well. So we'll see how that goes. SAP is going to have some pricing announcements at Sapphire, so that'll be interesting to get into. And I think there's going to be more mobility developer talk at Sapphire this year, even though Sapphire is not supposed to be a techie show, but there's a lot going on there as well. And John Appleby, I got to warn you, I have this bullshit detector, so if anyone is, uses like the phrase game change, for example, then I might have to hit this and
You just did.
yeah, so like if someone says something particularly optimistic about the Unwired platform, for example, well, we'll find out. I've got it ready in case. So I want to start with the Bluefin guys. What's been going on with mobility? What kind of projects are happening, and what are customers saying?
Oh, I guess Ollie's right in the middle of one, so get right on in there.
So we're implementing delivering the Sybase Unwired platform, connecting to back to SAP, providing native apps for iOS, and it's an interesting experience. It's not something that I don't think that's been well documented and out there at the moment. So,
Is the Unwired platform ready for action, John? John Appleby?
Well, I mean, these guys have implemented it. They've deployed it in one of the most hardened scenarios in the world on Apple devices in an institution that ordinarily wouldn't allow this kind of access to get outside. So, I guess so. Would be my answer.
Yeah.
there were
So,
a few challenges while implementing it.
a few challenges. So tell me how it started. What kind of issue? What was driving this? Was this a business user-driven thing, or was this IT, or how did it start?
Yeah. Well, shall I lay out the framework, and then maybe Ollie can get into the details of the challenges? I mean, the customer had a desire to do mobility, a strategic desire to do mobility as part of a program of work to make employees' lives better, effectively, shall we say. And so this is part of a mobility roadmap, which is starting to be put in place. And this is the first, or almost a pilot, if you like, project for the Unwired platform. And their desire was to get the first is expense management. So expense capture is a very painful process for them. And they wanted to start to simplify this process. So this project is really just the first of what should be a roadmap, and they're now in the second phase. And one of the first, I think, real large-scale hardened deployments of the Unwired platform, and therefore, kind of with it comes, I guess, the inevitable technology challenges that the new software platform introduces, as well as the organizational project changes that trying to introduce a new expenses system or an augmented expenses system introduces. That makes sense?
Yeah. So they didn't just want to install an app. They wanted to have an overall platform and strategy internally. And the app was sort of...
Yeah, and they wanted to test the Unwired platform's ability as well, I think. Could it do this sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. So Oliver, tell us about the project. What were some of the steps that you went through?
Okay, so the first release is out to a small user base, only a fraction of the users of SAP Expense, and SAP Expense was implemented quite a while back, and it has several limitations, and some of these we wanted to get around on the mobile device, and aid the process. So we started with sort of exposing key data manipulation on the SAP side, and some of this stuff in SAP Expense isn't designed to be accessed externally by anything other than your standard portal, your standard trip transactions. So there was a challenge there to get access to the data. And the second was providing some usable solution that appealed to users that are familiar with Apple's design philosophy of less is more, and also appeals to all the audit processes that they have, and need to show to the user in order to comply with their strict rules.
Some of those rules are legislative, right, and some of those are internal process.
Yeah.
But a number of these are legislative, which is one of the fun things.
So were the users sort of demanding this solution on their device, or did you have to kind of engage them and sort of involve them in the process, or?
Well, originally it was a CIO directive. Effectively, was we're doing mobile. Was what the CIO had said. We're doing this. We've got to. So that was what he was told. And I'm sure that came from a board directive. Effectively, was to make people's lives easier. So what this project did, I guess before Ollie even came aboard, was to say, if we were to start to do that, which process would we start with? We came up with a number of potential processes, including expense management, and which devices would we use? Would we use corporate devices? Would we use bring your own tech? Would it be BlackBerry, iOS? Where do we start? And maybe Ollie, you can explain the reasons why we came up with the decisions that we did.
Yeah, and that points to another sort of key problem that we had, was that we decided that we'd go for iOS initially, so your Apples and Apple iPads and iPhones, mainly because a lot of people had these as personal devices, and mainly because it just looks so much cooler than your standard BlackBerry app. And this posed a number of challenges to us, that we didn't want to implement an MDM solution, because that would be forcing some rules on the end user. So the app itself had to be this lockdown, secure app, rather than we had sort of complete control of the device.
I guess but also the reason why iOS was chosen was to show something nice, to excite people about mobility, which is actually quite funny, because iOS is a very small portion of their mobile usage. By far got more BlackBerries. And we chose iOS despite that.
And did it work, or were they excited about it, or?
I don't know, Ollie. So Ollie just went to an expo, like an executive expo last week. So what's the reaction?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, looking at the delegates that were wandering around, you're talking about the sort of the top management in both finance and IT departments, and they've all got either iPhones or iPads wandering around with them, and they take one look at the app and go, yes, I want it. How can we speed through the phases and deliver this quickly for us?
And that's one of our big challenges, is what we delivered in phase one was really a portion of what the overall app needs to do. And actually, of course, they want it all now.
Yeah. So what is the next step, to port it onto other devices, or to enhance the app for the iOS users, or to move into another app, or what's next?
So we're working through the second release phase for iOS, adding the receipt capture functionality. So this at the moment is a bugbear for most people, that they can enter all of their expenses, but they have to use either send in or scan, or use some additional process, non-mobile, to get a copy of their receipts in for approval for audit. And with second release, they'll be able to just point their device at the receipt, and it'll get submitted for them. And then after that, we're prototyping rollout a switch to BlackBerry, which is their main corporate device.
Oh yeah, yeah. What do you
I'm
got?
just going to have a quick interjection with a big shout out to Bonnie Rothenstein, who I caught capturing expenses using a fax machine in the SAP offices. So, hey Bonnie, I know you're listening to this. If you'd like our expenses to leave, we can talk.
Hey man, I like fax machines. You guys should do a fax rollout soon. John Moy, you still awake in Australia, man?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay,
Cool.
John.
So, do you have a couple questions for the guys about their project?
Yeah, I'm interested to know then if expense receipt capture. So is this targeted at a subset of the workforce, I guess, right? Those that travel and those that have iPhones and Blackberries only. Do they have like a BYOD type policy, or these are corporate issued?
Yeah, so a lot of the execs are given iPads, but mainly this is the BYOD for iPhones, iPads, and corporate would be corporate Blackberries when we roll out to that. But looking at numbers of SAP expense users, I think we're in the range of about 85,000, processing a staggering amount of claims.
1.2 billion claims a year or something. I heard ludicrous numbers of expense claims. So this is genuine value. That said, the initial rollout is to one market, right? To one market, and that's the largest market, but it's one of many markets.
Okay, so there's huge upside. So what's your pilot user base?
At the moment, we've got about 50 users.
Okay.
50 actually using it.
50 people actually enrolled.
Right.
That's
So
interesting.
we've got a way to go.
I know you're talking about it's a good opportunity to prove the platform in terms of scalability. What I haven't seen yet is I haven't seen large scale deployments. I've heard of I think Vodafone are in the process of a deployment, a worldwide deployment, but I haven't heard of I haven't found a site from say last year that's deployed to 10,000 handsets or anything of that nature. That's just from my research anyway.
Yeah, do we have concerns on scalability, or where are we at on scalability?
No, the SAP infrastructure has the ability to be able to be clustered. So SAP isn't a problem. SAP already handles this as a matter of traffic. So I mean, we're not too bothered.
Well, I'm kind of curious about the lessons that you've learned from this project, because just haven't had a chance to dig into too many unwired platform projects yet. Most of the customers I've talked to up to this point they've kind of proceeded with their own app rollouts without dealing with the unwired platform at all. So I'm kind of curious what lessons you've learned.
I guess, I don't know, I'll stick in a few and see what Ollie's got to add. I guess the first lesson learned is that if you're in a really secure lockdown environment and you've got the needs of online, offline these people have got, and you want to support multiple devices, the unwired platform actually is a really good product choice, genuinely, I think, from what I can see. It's better than many of the alternatives. So it allows you to secure device deployment or a number of the requirements that they had as an organization that I think could have been easily met another way. That's one of the things that I was quite interested to find. I think the second thing is that actually the business change management around these kind of processes is actually much harder than you might imagine. And I don't think, from a technology perspective, it was a new product and we had product challenges, which is exactly what you'd expect. Especially since it was in such a hardened environment, those increased the challenges. But that wasn't a surprise to me. But what was a surprise was actually the business change management around how do we change process to make it the right process to make people's lives better, rather than just to make the existing process mobilized. I think that's turning out to be the hardest piece of all. I think that's the interesting stuff for me. I don't know what you think on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. The use of SUP if you have a need for an online app on multiple platforms is a no-brainer, really, because the SAP config is the same. The SUP modeling you do once, and then just start with one platform, implement it UI, another platform, implement just the UI.
So John Appleby, how do you solve this issue around process change? Is there any secret sauce there? I mean, because you're basically saying to users, like, we want to make your lives better, but that's easier said than done, right? I mean, is it a matter of involving them in, like, so-called agile cycles of development, or what do you do?
I think these guys are already doing that, and actually one of the great things is having done phase one, and the reason for doing it on iOS is that the 50 top managers have all got iPhones or iPads, as Ollie said, right? So what we've got is the exec is excited, right? The decision makers, which is great, and that's a really interesting point. Is the exec's excited, but the problem is that below that, IT is often siloed, right? So you imagine that the guys doing the SAP portal expense process are really different to the people in our project team, and they're different to the people in HR or finance business. So actually making a change to process is business change, which isn't IT. So how do we do that? Well, I guess we're trying to figure that out, and we're trying to figure out how we engage the business to allow that kind of organizational change to happen, with the IT being a driver, which I think is perhaps a little back to front, but could be successful.
John Moy, how does this story compare with what you're hearing about in Ausland?
I guess I've been keeping my ear to the ground in terms of what's going on in the local region, and we're not seeing SUP implementations at the moment, although I'm hearing about the potential for some to start up. SAP does have some good Afaria references. In fact, one of our subsidiaries, for the company I work for, which is Aussie Post, actually we use Afaria in our Messenger Post subsidiary. So that's not a problem. But in terms of SUP, it just feels very much in the local market like everyone's looking at everyone else to see who goes first. And I think that there is a bit of a skills problem. I know Bluefin are in a fortunate position to have had a history with SUP going back to the co-innovation days. The reality for customers and even for partners locally is that you need to have some iOS development skills if you're deploying to iOS, or BlackBerry development skills if you're deploying to BlackBerry, and so forth, right? Unless you're using the hybrid web container, which is quite new and not entirely mature. So it's very much that I think the mitigators that we're seeing are around skills. Not in-house organizations like us, we don't have an iOS development shop, we don't have a BlackBerry development shop. When I talked to Sybase a year ago, it was very much, here's SAP, it's a development platform. And the messaging is a challenge for SAP customers, because I've always felt, in the time I've worked in the SAP world, is that in the DNA of SAP customers that they buy off-the-shelf applications, right? That's why they bought SAP. And to go to that same type of customer and say, look, here's a platform now you develop from scratch, is a big call. And not only that, to develop from scratch in certain skill sets that don't exist in the organization. So then what we do, we turn to partners, and it's immature in this region, partners having those types of skills. So, and the other mitigator, I think, is around the platform requirements around, having an Afaria box if you're using Afaria in conjunction with SAP and SUP, and if you're taking SAP's off-the-shelf apps, since the App Store was instantiated, also having a NetWeaver Gateway instance in there. So, as you may know, I've blogged about the need for at least some part of this platform to be offered in a cloud or SaaS model. And I've actually talked to some local vendors around that, and we know Capgemini have a global agreement with Sybase, going back to the Sybase days, around hosted or SaaS offerings. But it's still early days. I feel like we're, in terms of the Capgemini thing, for instance, the service existed in the United States, but it didn't exist here yet. So, that's just indicative of where we're at.
You're referring to Capgemini's cloud SUP service, just to be clear, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yep.
It's SUP and Afaria.
Yep. John Appleby, continue.
Yeah, I had a question for Ollie that I think you'll like, John. So, as John Moy alluded to, I deliberately built up a capability around mobile. And, if we look at a typical project team, right, there are elements that we provide and we don't provide. For instance, John's comments around devices. So more often than not, we get device specialists from the market because we want them fresh from writing iOS or BlackBerry apps. So we bring those guys in on a project basis based on their skills to get exactly the right kind of person. And especially that's the same is true for usability. We normally partner on the deep depths of business usability. But where we built a core capability is around the Unwired platform and the NetWeaver mobile platform, and so the process of that is the MBOs to generate from BAPIs and ERP through the data objects in SUP, and then the data model and logic model that supports that. I guess my question to Ollie was, having been through that learning process from scratch, from being an SAP ABAP developer to being an Unwired platform developer, what does that involve?
Yes, so I always recommend when showing someone how to start SUP modeling is to start with the ABAP, to think about data and expose it in a relational form. So the modeling environment is pretty straightforward. There's a lot to think about in terms of caching, frequency, synchronization to different devices, and all this sort of thing. And then once you've got all that done, developing, generating device-specific APIs. Obviously for your iOS, for Apple devices, is going to be Objective-C. For BlackBerry, Java. So a small knowledge, or in some cases a large knowledge, is required in those particular languages to to get it working, to provide some sort of usable application. But this is completely separate from any UI design, any sort of device security that you would implement. And at that point, yeah, as John said, bring someone experienced, fresh from the market to give their insight into how that's done is the best way to go.
But if I understand from a skills perspective, sorry, again, I'm playing back to you, John, but from a skills perspective, if you're an SAP app developer who's got business process knowledge, which I think is important, you need to understand what that data means to the people, and you've got a background of C or Java or something equivalent, you should pick up the web platform pretty quickly, right? That's what you need to pick it up.
Yeah, fundamentally, you do need to understand what the data is, how the data is structured, so that when you connect multiple devices, it doesn't just break. And working at how all these things fit together, the relationships between your MBOs is crucial. And for that, you need to know a bit about the process, a bit about what the data is stored.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so John Moy, you've been listening to that. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, ostensibly I agree. I mean, bit that resonates for me is the part that John Appleby talked about in engaging seasoned developers from the field. So your BlackBerry developers and your iOS developers. I think that's a really important thing, because you want people that understand the usability concepts for those platforms, right? Understand how an iOS app should behave based on Apple's human interface guidelines, right? And that's different from how, for instance, an Android app should behave, or a BlackBerry app. I wrote a blog about embracing long-haired developers last year around the mobile space, and it's very much that type of thing. I'll give you an example of where I see it didn't seem to work, and I had quite a large global SI come to me and show me something, what they've done with SUP, and to be honest, I wasn't impressed at all. It really looked as though an ABAP developer had for the first time implemented a list view and a detailed view in SUP, and it was very basic, and I could see the ABAP developer would have been doing high fives that they'd accomplished it, but it was very far from what you would actually expect in terms of usability. And as an example, logging into the app when they were offline didn't provide an alert that they were actually offline. That's immediate failure on Apple's own human interface guidelines. I think bringing in developers from the field, seasoned UI developers, is a great thing.
Yeah, developers high-fiving probably doesn't constitute a good benchmark for success.
That's so true, John, on that usability point, because that was key to us. I showed Ollie's colleague Brenton the Expensify app, and I said, look, our app has got to be at least as good as Expensify. If it's not as good as Expensify, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
And it's better, by the way. And that's the point.
Really, I'm going to let Robert Scoble know.
Sorry, Expensify.
I'm going to let Robert Scoble know. I'm sure doubtful that that's true. So
I'm pretty certain Scoble's not talking about Expensify anymore.
Yeah,
that's what happened to him.
I'm pretty sure as well. So this is a good place to shift gears a little bit, because I want to, in our final segment of our taping, I want to look ahead to what you guys would like to learn from Sapphire. But in order to do that, we need to set the stage briefly and talk about SAP's mobility and database announcements, which ties right back into John Moy's comments about engaging external developer communities, because on April 10th in San Fran, SAP made a series of announcements. Actually, Sanjay Poonen did, who's now the go-to-market end-to-end mobility leader for SAP, which is a decision I welcome, by the way. I didn't like Sybase's mobile silo, so I thought this was an important step. Now, John Moy, you had a chance to actually get a bit of a preview of these announcements because Sanjay Poonen, when he was down in Mastering SAP Tech Australia, went over them with you. In a nutshell, there's new partnerships, including Adobe PhoneGap, Sencha, Accelerator. But can you give us a little bit of your take, John Moy, on those announcements and how you think that fits into this notion of engaging these external developers and stuff like that?
Okay. The first thing I should say, yes, Sanjay did give us a preview, or about the partnerships with Adobe and Sencha and so forth. He didn't tell us about. He didn't tell us about the Cyclo announcement, but I can understand why, because it would have been a lot of commercial sensitivity.
Yeah.
But, I'd like to talk about the Cyclo thing a little later. But in terms of the engagement with those communities, I think it's a great thing, right? I'm a big believer in there's some flourishing open source mobile framework communities that are just moving at light speed out there. I blogged about jQuery Mobile a year ago, and it's just it's just moved on so far from when I looked at it, which was in an alpha release. I think it's now 1.1. Interestingly, in terms of engagement with these communities or embracing these types of frameworks, Sybase actually incorporated that jQuery framework in its hybrid web container way back last year, right? In, I don't know, June timeframe, something like that. And there wasn't a lot of fanfare about that. I know Eric Lai did write a blog about it. I think there's a lot more visibility in terms of this recent announcement about Sencha and so forth. I think it's great. It's interesting when you actually dissect what the actual partnerships are, and you look at what may be SAP's intent. The PhoneGap framework is basically going to be ported into the hybrid web container, right, for SUP. So the implication there is, well, if you're using PhoneGap, you need to use SUP, and therefore you need to, I don't know if we should call it SUP anymore, SAP mobile platform, but you understand what I mean. So in terms of Sencha and Accelerator, the fine print around that is that they'll both be, those frameworks will both be enabled to support OData. And the implication there is that you'll need a NetWeaver gateway, as part of your enablement architecture. So in all three of those cases, there's at least one component of SAP's mobile architecture that you'll need, to enable yourself from a mobile standpoint.
Right. John Appleby, thoughts?
I'm going to turn this one over to Ollie, I think, but my general sense would be that actually what SAP are doing generically around open architectures is pretty thing, especially OData to JSON in the forthcoming. But I don't know, Ollie, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I really agree that the move towards the sort of using some of the open source SDKs that are already available that have got quite a good following now. We were creating jQuery mobile applications beginning of 2011 for timesheet entry. And it was pretty stable. You could deploy to multiple platforms. What do you think, John?
Yeah, Oliver was asking you for your thoughts on some of the technical guts of this thing. Let me ask you about the gateway piece a little bit, because are you concerned about the gateway dependency aspects, like, because they talk about it in terms of OData, but OData is sort of his code name for using Gateway, right? And so
Yeah.
how many customers are actually using Gateway at this time? So does that create adoption issues? Or, I mean, okay, you have these whole new ecosystems, but are they going to have enough back-end systems to work with?
Absolutely. So therein lies the challenge from my standpoint, because if I put myself into the shoes of, I'm a registered iOS developer, say, let's say, what do I want to invest my time in, right? So, today as or let's say as a Sencha developer or whatever, that you can build apps and deploy them to, for instance, the Apple App Store, right? In a consumer setting. So basically a self-contained app, maybe it has some connectivity to Twitter or Facebook, and who knows what scenario that might be. But you can do that today, and you can monetize that, right, and go forward. So what you do is you look at what is the market. Well, the market is how many iPhones are out there, how many iPads, and those frameworks. You can also hit the Android market as well. So there's massive numbers that you can reach, and you can reach today. Now, if you look at this in the context of the SAP Mobile Enterprise ecosystem, to be able to be successful and be able to sell your app into the SAP customer base, your customer opportunity is not the 170,000 or I think Sanjay Pune referred to that number of SAP customers. Your opportunity is how many of those customers have Gateway, a NetWeaver Gateway installed there. So, it would be interesting to know what that number is. And all of a sudden, I'm sure that number isn't, it's not enormous today. So I think the challenge is for how does SAP proliferate that quickly, or is it, is SAP's intent to monetize heavily off Gateway? And therein lies a bit of the chicken and the egg problem. Yeah.
Yep. And we have other issues SAP has to conquer, such as an app store that is sticky and intuitive, that people can sell their wares in. We have the issue of runtime license pricing, which I know SAP is working on, and we hopefully will hear some stuff about that at Sapphire. I'd be surprised if we didn't. And then, of course, there's the NetWeaver license issue, which remains the rock in the shoe of the aspiring developer. And when I was talking with, so Sanjay has a guy who's important in this scheme of things. His name is Fawad Zakaria, and he's heading up ecosystem. And Fawad was actually in a meeting with me and a couple other bloggers and Sencha after the announcement. And so he was saying all this good stuff, and I was like, that sounds great for a customer that wants to develop their own app, but what about developers? We need a robust apps ecosystem. How do they get access to this backend system? And he's like, I know they hate hearing this question over and over and over again. And he did say that they expected some movement on the license issue in the Sapphire-ish timeframe. He didn't commit to Sapphire. He used the word Sapphire-ish, so there is a little bit of a distinction there. But what that tells me is that as we're looking towards Sapphire, that we're probably going to hear some stuff around mobile development at Sapphire, even though Sapphire is usually more of a businessy show. I don't think SAP is going to wait till TechEd to push this issue forward a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what they have to say. Yeah.
So one thing I can say is that I was put in touch with a gentleman by the name of John Wargo. He reports, I think, through to Sanjay, and he did recently blog about the new announcements around PhoneGap and so forth. And the sense that I get with talking to people like John is that they really are serious. They really have the intent to open up this system. Whether they can execute on it is another matter, because there's a lot of challenges. And I know Dennis Howlett's outlined a lot of lot of real challenges, but I do sense a real honest intent, and that's for me a change from last year. Right, last year it was extremely difficult for anyone to get hold of unwide platform. I do wonder whether SAP has suffered for last year from a timing standpoint. I think it's lost a proportion of developers. Developers and the sad thing is that they may well have been the developers that are the most innovative, right? They're the ones that want to jump into new technologies, and they would have been looking at SUP last year and not being able to get their hands on it, so they would have just opened up some other channel, be it Android development or iOS or maybe Accenture, that type of thing, and now they can come back to the fold. But I do get a real honest sense of intent that they really want to change this. So it will be interesting to see the next six months or the next year. I think will be very telling in this space.
And I think the fall tech ed season is going to be make or break for SAP on this issue. They have to get this right by tech ed, and they know that. I think. Appleby.
I'm going to be controversial here. I'm sorry.
All right.
It's time. So we were sat around at lunch, and Oliver and his colleagues were describing what RIM are doing. And we had a mobile developer lunch, so we had maybe, it just happened to be in the area, 8 to 10 people. We were talking through it. And they were saying how incredibly impressed they were with what RIM were doing. The way they were giving out sample devices, the way they were incentivizing developers by guaranteeing $10,000 of revenue per app, by the way that they were creating communities, and the way they script through all of this rubbish around legal, and they were giving free copies of their developer center to download without registration, and free registration to sign up for apps. I mean, they're just throwing everything at the ecosystem, and I think that SAP has totally missed the point of what we're saying all along, because they've got all these people with great intents, but the culture doesn't support it. Rip up the paperwork, I say, rip up the license paperwork to download SUP. Make it, and look at that end-to-end thing. And we said this to the executives before. Look at the point it takes from deciding to write an app to monetizing it, and rip out every piece of friction. Don't try and make things better. Rip out the friction. It's what's happening now isn't enough, and it's going to take a cultural change and not a procedural change to fix that. There you go. That's my controversy for the day.
Amen. Amen.
And is it not also a problem that, I mean, if you're a BlackBerry developer, you can now just log onto the website, download the SDK, and happy coding. If you're iOS, you sign up to a small fee, develop a program, download the app, start coding. But for anything to do with SAP mobility, you need to have some knowledge in the end device, or go down the HTML hybrid web container route. Have either some sort of middleware, either SUP gateway, some exposed on ICF, and then have some SAP system as well.
That's all part of the friction. That's all part of the friction, but it's one aspect of it, right? One aspect of it is the legal paperwork you have to go through to sign up as a developer still, if you actually want to publish an app. And there's the cost framework for the app. There is the challenges of getting downloads and OSS and SCN, single sign-on. I mean, every single piece of this adds friction. I mean, the list goes on. They've got to rip out that friction. You've got to do it by a change of culture to say friction goes. It's no longer acceptable to have friction in the development process. And there are lots of people doing wonderful work, and I don't want to take that away.
No, it's a point that needs emphasizing, absolutely. When I shot that video with Sanjay Poonen in Palo Alto the day after the announcements, and we're kind of giving him a hard time about this stuff, and he said, I'm not going to rest until you guys are happy, until you guys are developing, You know, the mentors, etc., are building apps and they're selling apps and they're making money and they're making a contribution. And it's funny because when he said that, I thought to myself, you know, that's going to be a challenge. Like, but he's not going to sleep a lot if he's not going to rest until that's done. But it is good to see that level of conviction. But I do think you're right, because it's not something that one person can will into being. It's a cultural and business model evolution inside of SAP. And what we have debated until late at night at conferences is whether SAP feels a level enough urgency around this topic to make those changes. And that's really what we're going to find out.
Exactly. I think they believe it. I think they just haven't got the realization they need to move from an operational to a cultural shift here. John, I've got to interrupt you. We're being kicked out of our room. We're out of time.
So yeah, I see.
We're gonna have to wrap it up.
I see a stern, disapproving look. Doesn't she know she's gonna be live on the webcast? Oh, that's so funny. All right. Well, can we have like 60 seconds? Can
Yeah, literally just wrapping this second. Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think that's good. I think we covered a lot of the topics. Shall we just do a quick lightning round on what we want to get out of the Sapphire announcements and stuff, just very quickly, starting with you guys, since you may have to cam off?
Yeah, we'll give our lightning round, and we want to jump. I just want to see the developer thing happen. Everything else is in place. That's it for me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, guys.
Appreciate it. And John, what about you? I know you'll be. You won't be at Sapphire, right? Or are you coming?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
It's a long way. It's a long way from here.
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge pike. Absolutely. So what are you gonna wanna? What are you gonna want to hear?
Obviously the developer thing, but interesting that I want to hear more about the Cyclo thing too. I think that's actually a big thing, and when it was announced, I didn't expect it. Completely caught me by surprise. But the more I dig into it, the more it makes sense to me. And you know, I was just by good fortune able to be in a webinar the other day where the Cyclo presenter, couldn't turn up, and the MD took their place and talked about, you know, the positioning of Cyclo, and I really got a good story. I really got a good story out of it. And I think now, you know, the SAP is trying to cover all its bases. It's trying to put a real strong peg in the ground around actual apps. You know, Cyclo's known to be very strong in the asset maintenance, you know, field services area, and that really appeals to SAP's heartland of, you know, manufacturing customers and, you know, utilities, that type of thing. In terms of Cyclo, you know, I'm really interested to see. I think it's a really good play because SAP now have some really strong solutions that they can stand behind. And I say solutions because now it's not just about, you know, selling a development platform and maybe some, you know, I mean, I know SAP now has some apps behind it, but Cyclo's got some, you know, proven apps that would be in demand in the SAP marketplace. And it sounds, in terms of on first look, highly scalable, highly robust. Similar to, I mean, we use a solution around parcel tracking in our business, right? It's a small company, but it's robust because it can handle 2.5 million transactions a day. And Cyclo's of that nature. I think they quoted something like one customer that processes 243 transactions a second, right, through that infrastructure. So I know when I alluded to scalability before around Sybase, you know, what I haven't heard about is real life examples of large scale deployments, you know, apart from perhaps Vodafone that's in process.
Right. So when you talk about the Cyclo acquisition in Sapphire, is there something in particular you're hoping to hear a little more about?
Very much I think in terms of a strategy for SAP to cement themselves in the enterprise mobile arena, right? It's a really good play. What it does do is it muddies the architectural waters. We've heard that SAP intends to port the apps to the Unwired platform. But what is the timeline around that? What really are the intentions? Because if you were to take on Cyclo today, you're actually installing yet another mobile platform, right? Which is their agentry platform. And in terms of merging those platforms, I'm not sure it's that simple, because SUP runs on Windows only. Last I looked, agentry runs on Unix, Linux, and Windows. So already in terms of platform support, they're different. So it's not something you can merge overnight.
Mm-hmm. A fair point. Well, hopefully we will learn more. I expect that they will have some things to say about that. For me, I think I have a couple of goals. I'm going to the Mobility ASUG pre-conference day, and that's a chance for me to do a little bit of a deep dive and also spend the day with SAP customers who are dealing with mobile issues. And for me, I just want to really get an even better handle on where the customer concerns and issues are, because to me that's a big part of it. You can't just impose a platform upon them. They have to buy into what you're trying to do. So I really want to understand from a customer perspective what the challenges are and why mobility matters to customers and in what context. So I'm looking forward to peeling between those hype layers and seeing what I can find out. And the developer conversations, hopefully those will continue. Like we said, even though Sapphire is a business-oriented show, can't wait till TechEd to talk about these developer issues, because it feels like we're finally getting some critical mass around the recognition of the problems and what needs to be done about it, but there's a ton of work still to do. So hopefully we'll keep the fire under that burner hot by pushing SAP on the right questions and also getting their feedback on what they need to hear from us. I mean, what we've tried to explain is that we're not doing this to make SAP look bad, but because we see a developer ecosystem as a huge win for the company. So that's kind of where the pressure is coming from. And I think that's what, as you pointed out, Dennis Howlett, who's pioneered this stuff, and others have said all along. And I think the message is starting to sink in, but then we're going to, there's a lot to talk about too. I mean, there's HANA, I think there's going to be a few things about cloud, so we'll see how it all comes together. But anyway.
Absolutely. And I think
John, thanks for...
Sorry, I think the HANA thing, SAP is just more comfortable in that space, right? Because it's more like their traditional thing, and they're competing with Oracle, a natural competitor. The mobile arena is in some ways very foreign, I think, to SAP from a cultural perspective and an understanding perspective.
What's interesting though about I do agree with that, because HANA fits into more a classic SAP culture, which is build something awesome and then sell big ticket implementations through your sales force. So HANA does fit better with traditional SAP culture, but I would make the argument that HANA ultimately won't be successful unless SAP solves the ecosystem issues around platform and development, because the in-memory part of HANA, the part of HANA is fast kind of stuff, that's not actually quote-unquote game-changing as SAP might like to think, because other vendors are in that game too, and speed is going to be a commodity. What won't be a commodity is business apps and new kinds of applications that were never possible before. And again, I think partners and developers are going to play a big role in developing those applications. And so you get back to the same issues around platform and things like that.
Yeah, really good point.
And which is why I've been kind of making the argument for a long time that HANA shouldn't be SAP's metaphor for the future. It should be platform and ecosystem. Because I think what we see in the smartphone world around RIM versus Apple versus Android is very much going to happen in the enterprise world eventually. Is a better platform is going to win, because customers aren't going to want to develop their own stuff from scratch all the time. They're going to want to be able to work with trusted partners and buy apps and get it and get industry specific stuff that really works for them, and that should be out of the box more often than not. the days of spending years on custom projects and maintaining all that, I don't see that across the board. Maybe some customers, but I just think most customers have given up on that model.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and they're getting spoiled by their portable devices, right? Because every day they're downloading apps that are awesome, right? And that are getting the job done for them.
Yeah.
And they're asking themselves, why would I want to build that if I could just plug and play?
Yes.
You know, because that's not my business problem. Anyway, it's going to be interesting. So we'll see. So this video hopefully will come out before Sapphire if we can sort through all the editing challenges that we're going to have.
Yeah.
But really appreciate you taking the time, John. It was excellent to talk with you, and I want to compliment you on your mobility blogs because you've done some of the best blogging in this area. And I hope everyone who watched to the bitter end will then go check out your work. We didn't even talk about your encyclopedic blog where you categorized all of SAP's mobile solutions, but I encourage everyone to go check out John on SCN and read that stuff because it'll really get you up to speed. So,
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Pleasure.